the application itself, but really this is mostly about how to, about the actual opportunity. I'm always available by email or phone, but this is really Head Start and Katie's show.
Thanks, Julia. All right, so today we just did our introductions. We're going to also now walk you through the RFP that we're discussing, and we will talk about the content that's in that RFP. We'll also talk about how to actually apply to the RFP. And then, we'll have time for questions most likely at the end. But again, I encourage you to please type in your questions as you have them. If there's any way that I can pause and answer those, I will try to. But again, I want to make sure that I give you all of the information possible to really support your success in applying. All right, so I think we can go ahead and jump in. Tom, if you want to give us our next slide here, that'd be great.
Sorry, I advanced the slides too far. I'll go back.
Oh, no problem. All right, thank you. Okay, so I think a lot of you are familiar with the Department of Family Support Services, but in case you aren't, I want to make sure that we give you this overview. The Department of Family Support Services is comprised of 8 program divisions. So on your screen, what you see are all of the divisions. The Children's Services Division is highlighted in red, and that is who administers this RFP and who I work for. But within the department, we also have our youth services, domestic violence services, veteran services, workforce services, homeless services, senior services, and human services delivery division. So, we are a very comprehensive department. But again, this RFP is administered through the Children's Services Division of the department. So the department launched a strategic framework in 2016 to be responsive to the field, and the way that they did that was to refresh their mission and division-wide priorities. So our mission is working with community partners. We connect to Chicago residents and families in order to give them resources that help build stability and support their well-being and empower them to thrive. In our division, we have some priorities that are really our department's strategic priorities, and those are to deliver and support high-quality, innovative, and comprehensive services that empower our clients to thrive, to collaborate with community partners, sister agencies, and public officials on programs and policies that improve Chicagoans' lives and advance systemic change. We also strive to inform the public of resources available to them through DFSS and its community partners. And we are also stewards. We provide resources responsibly and effectively. When we think about the Children's Services Division in particular, our program offers comprehensive services to children and families, and we serve children and families through community-based programs for the Chicago Early Learning community. So oftentimes we call that CEL. Our comprehensive services are designed to support the school readiness of children and the efficacy of family systems to meet child and family outcomes. At CSD, we manage all community-based CEL programs, and we seek to ensure that these programs offer comprehensive, high-quality services for all of the children and families that are enrolled. Our division efforts are to build a strong system of services that are guided by the following 3 priorities. So the first one is to maximize access to high-quality learning programs by matching investments to the needs of local communities and reducing the barriers to entry for children and families. We take this very seriously. We want to make sure that families are provided with equitable services. We also improve the comprehensiveness and quality of early learning across all of our programs to ensure that children and families' needs are met. And we also create a strong system of service providers by increasing support and reducing administrative burden for community-based providers of early learning. So in our division, we are really doing our best to make sure that we meet the needs of the most vulnerable children and families in the city. It's very important as you apply to this RFP or any RFP within our division that you understand the basic concept of what we are trying to do. It is extremely important that our support service providers really embody our mission, and we expect them to have vision in what they're planning to do. We take our roles very seriously in serving the community and always doing our best to be responsive to their needs and be responsive in planning and use data to inform our decisions. So as we get into the RFP, I think some of you have had an opportunity to look at it. We're just going to go through. I am going to read this to you. I apologize. That's usually not my style as a trainer, but I want to, again, make sure that you are all hearing the same information. So generally, the goal of this RFP is so that we can award one entity that can provide coordinated services to our Chicago Early Learning direct service delegate agencies and to the grantee, which is the Department of Family Support Services Children's Services Division, in the subjects that are related to professional development, which we often call PD, and I will be calling PD from this point forward. So in the subjects related to PD, training coordination, and event planning. So we plan to deliver comprehensive PD opportunities through the inclusion of trainings, conferences, and career fairs. These will be done with our direct service delegate agencies, with all of their CEL professionals and parents of children who are enrolled in our CEL programs. We want to make sure that programs that indirectly serve children, families, and professionals within the DFSS CSD division are also provided these opportunities to engage in professional development opportunities. We also, in our division, will work to provide a comprehensive Chicago Early Learning quarterly professional development calendar so that all of our CEL professionals and the Citywide Parent Policy Council, which is our CPPC, and the partners that are partnered with our programs are informed of community opportunities that are available each quarter in an effort to help each attendee enhance their knowledge on each topic and to assist each professional in obtaining the annual required training hours. We reference a lot in this RFP to make sure that you're looking at the program rationale and context section of the RFP, because in there we list out all of our program requirements, which I have delineated on a slide that we'll look at further, just to make really clear what our expectations are and where you can find all of our requirements. In our division, we also ensure that all PD opportunities are successfully and intentionally planned for and executed so that participants enhance their skills, performance, and knowledge related to caring for children in the early education settings and strengthening family engagement, which collectively promotes school readiness. We also provide these services through collaboration with CEL support service providers within our division and our approved partners, and we ensure to align all of our practices to adhere to the DFSS CSD Gateways Authorized Entity. It is very important that we understand the guidelines of the Gateways Authorized Entity so that all of our services align to those guidelines. We take very seriously that we are an authorized entity, and we need to maintain that status by making sure that all of our guidelines are met. When we're talking about the quarterly PD calendar, this is something that we want to make sure is one of the first things that this support service provider is going to take control of. We have a grantee training and technical assistance plan that we submit to the Office of Head Start every year. And so that will be integral in the work of developing the quarterly professional development calendar. So that is the high-level overview of the goals that we are looking to achieve by contracting with a support service provider to help us deliver all of our PD services. And next, we'll talk specifically about what the support service provider goals are. And that would be anyone who is awarded, we would be calling them the support service provider. And so at a minimum, we want to make sure that the person who, or the team that's awarded, has already had experience and has successfully planned and delivered and tracked annual PD opportunities within a database and the Gateway's Authorized Entity portal, ensuring compliance of the Gateway's Authorized Entity policies and procedures. The DFSS CSD database that we currently use is our COPA system. We use COPA, we use some other pieces internally as well. And so the support service provider would be given an overview of what we use internally and then would be asked to think through what they could use on their end as well. Currently, right now, all of our trainings, people have to register through our COPA database. And so this support service provider would need to be granted access to that database so that they could see the attendance and make sure that it's tracked. We also want to make sure that the support service provider assists with the creation, maintenance, and dissemination of that quarterly professional development calendar. We want to make sure that in that calendar, there's an array of opportunities that are offered every year that are, again, really responsive to the needs of the community and the requirements of the CEL program standards and regulations and all of the guidelines that are in that program rationale and context section. The support service provider will also need to provide the assurance that each PD opportunity is fully supported, and that can be done in collaboration with the CEL support service providers and their subject matter experts. They can also use the other professional trainers at their discretion, as well as DFSS CSD, and they are expected to partner with us to leverage some content expertise, marketing, and materials. So as you may or may not be aware, there are actually, I believe, 12 RFPs in total that are going out of our division. Some have already gone out, some are yet to be released. And this support service provider over PD is expected to collaboratively work with the other support service providers that will be awarded through this bulk of RFPs that are going out. It's essential that the collaboration happens because often you will be getting trainers out of those other support service provider contracts. You can also, again, use other professional trainers. Those would require you as the support service provider to actually pay them out of your budget, whereas leveraging would not have to come out of your budget as it's already budgeted in some of our other contracts. So again, we can talk a little bit more about that later as well. And then the last one here, we want to make sure that the support service provider intentionally provides professional development engagement to our CPPC or the Citywide Parent Policy Council, the members of that council, and that includes coordinating services so that they can attend in and out of town conferences, both in person and distance learning, and that this support service contractor also help in the registration and scheduling of travel logistics as needed for the CPPC members. So we'll keep going here. I wanted to call the attention to our program standards, regulation, and guidelines. Again, these are going to be in the program rationale and context section that is in the program description in the RFP. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with these if you're not already. And if you are already familiar, that you become even more of an expert in these program standards, regulations, and guidelines. And so the first one we have is our CELS 2.0, which is our Chicago Early Learning Standards, which is really a high-level overview of all of our programs. So we have Head Start programs, early Head Start programs, preschool for all programs, prevention initiative programs, meaning that our money, our funding comes from the federal, state, and the local level as well. And so when we put all of that funding together, that means that we're putting all of those requirements together. And the feds, the state, and city all have different standards. So the CEL standards is our, again, our high-level attempt to combine, the most important standards that we want to make sure all of our programs are doing. And we hold all of our programs responsible to these standards as we monitor the standards that are within this manual. We also want to make sure that anybody awarded this contract would be very familiar with the Illinois Department of Human Services and Accelerate Illinois Quality Rating and Improvement System, which is our national system. And in the state, we have adopted, the QRIS is our national system, and Accelerate is what the state has adopted as their QRIS system. So if you don't already understand those pieces, it's extremely important to understand those, as professional development is directly linked to those standards and guidelines. And of course, and you're going to hear this a lot, we want to make sure that whoever is awarded is really proficient in understanding the Gateways to Opportunity Illinois Professional Development System and the authorized entity. Again, this is directly linked to professional development. We feed into the state system, and so it's extremely important to understand that system. There are a lot of great resources within that system as well to get familiar with. We also want to make sure that the person or team awarded is familiar with the ISB, or Illinois State Board of Education guidelines, and they specifically understand professional development, professional education, or license requirements. We want to make sure that the person awarded understands the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, or DCFS, not only the child care center regulations, but also the daycare homes licensing standards, because we serve children in center-based programs as well as home-based programs. So it's important to understand those are our kind of foundational standards that we build on top of. We also want to make sure that whoever is awarded has some familiarity with accreditation guidelines, such as the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC, or the National Accreditation Commission, NAC. And it's essentially important that the person awarded is versed in the Head Start program performance standards. The latest revision of those was seen in 2016. I have a feeling that they will be updated soon. I don't have any actual insight into that, just my professional experience of almost 20 years in Head Start. There usually are revisions every 5 years or so. So be on the lookout for those if they happen to come out as well. So that's a lot of standards and regulations and guidelines to be familiar with. So again, if you're not already, you might want to do a little bit of research into those to make sure that you really have a full understanding of what we expect out of our programs, because that will give you great insight into what we look for professional development. All right, so our program requirements, specifically what we're looking for here is the support service provider to really have the ability to bring in a trainer or a host and to really help deliver the training and to be really supportive to the trainer. Overall, we host on average 1,200 training sessions, 6 single or multi-day conferences, 2 career fairs, all of which are citywide, and we also coordinate services for parents to attend conferences. It's very important to note that until further notice, due to COVID-19, all of our PD will be conducted in distance learning formats using virtual platforms. So at least at the beginning, we're going to need to make sure that whoever is awarded has the ability to lift in-person trainings into virtual platforms. We are currently working on approving a virtual platform that we will use on a standard basis. We are looking into Zoom, as we know that GoToWebinar is not as interactive as Zoom is. So it will be very, very important that whoever is applying really understand how to utilize virtual platforms, and not only how to utilize them, but how to help trainers and facilitate, similar to what Tom's doing today, you know, really taking the lead on that technical assistance aspect, helping support participants before the training, during the training, and after the training, to make sure that it is smooth, and all the trainer has to do is what I'm doing today, is just talk through and present, because a lot of us understand that when we are training, it is very important that we have support. And so a lot of trainers I know are really in, or have been over the past few months, really having a learning curve ahead of them if they weren't already using virtual platforms. It's been something that has been a bit of a challenge because it's not something that they usually do. And when, no matter what format we're using, we have to make sure that we are using adult learning theory principles. And again, that does not change if we're in a virtual platform. We need to make sure that we are helping all adult learners really take in the content. We don't just want to, you know, give training after training without making sure that they are really getting out information that we're hoping to deliver, and we need to do that in an effective way that meets adult learning needs. So next we're going to talk about the required qualifications that are expected. So Tom, if you want to just give us the next slide, that would be great.
Yeah, I think I'm on the next slide for, is it required qualifications?
Yeah, I see program requirements still. I don't know if that's just on my end.
I think it might be on your end. I can
now
go back and.
Now I see it. Yep.
Okay,
yep.
good.
Thank you. All right, so our required qualifications, we really want to make sure that whoever is awarded has the organizational capacity to meet the very extensive expectations that are laid out in this RFP. So we're suggesting that the person awarded have a team that looks like this, that has a project manager, an event coordinator, a data specialist, and a facilitation specialist. We want to make sure that whoever is awarded has the ability to leverage trainers, presenters, or hosts, and additional staff to support the on-site management, facilitation, and registration needs of multi-day conferences. Again, those multi-day conferences right now at least would be in a virtual setting, but as we hopefully move out of the pandemic at some point, we do host these multi-day conferences at large venues, which require, you know, leveraging staff during those days, because it requires a lot of people to pull those off successfully. We want to make sure that this team has direct or closely related experience using the Gateway's authorized entity portal, that they demonstrate excellence in communication, collaboration, and organization, that they have experience in planning and executing career fairs or the like. So if it's not specifically career fairs, it could be large-scale events, and also have the ability to transition in person to distance learning sessions using virtual platforms. Again, these titles, the project manager, event coordinator, data specialist, and facilitation specialist, are suggestions. There is a requirement that there is one person who is designated, and it can only be one person who is designated to be the data input specialist into the Gateway's authorized entity portal. This is one of the requirements of the Gateway's authorized entity, is that it is just one person, and that's to have quality assurance over the data that is going in and going out. So again, You can be creative with how you want to design your team, but it does need to be a team. There is no way that this can be taken on with 1 or 2 people. You have to make sure that whoever you are assigning to certain things really has the expertise and capacity to see things from start to finish and to follow through. Our contractors work with a lot of autonomy. They are expected, again, to collaborate with us, but once you are up and running, we expect you to deliver the content successfully, and that if you're going to run into any issues, that you make us aware of that sooner rather than later, so that our support can be provided to you. However, we do expect, given the amount of money that is awarded to this contractor, that you really use your professional discretion and autonomy, and that you are walking in with a team of experts who can deliver these services without a lot of hand over hand. We will use probably December as a month of transition, as we already do some of the professional development coordination in-house. So there will be a time for transition, but again, we do want to make sure that whoever is awarded really understands what they are doing and walks in with expertise. All right, so let's talk about the required activities. Really, these are an overview. There are a lot of required activities that are specified in the RFP. So make sure that you are paying special attention to those required activities, because those directly link into the goals. Those should be your tasks to help you meet the objectives. So we want generally for there to be a supportive infrastructure that's built within your team to support the delivery services that, again, abide by the DFSS, DSD, Gateways Authorized Entity policies and procedures that are always aligned to our CEL program standards. So everything that is done by the support service provider is expected to link and be shown through and in alignment with our CEL program standards. We want to make sure that the support service provider that is awarded provides effective planning, coordination, and facilitation and delivery of all PD opportunities, either hosted or sponsored in partnership with DFSS CSD. To ensure that, we want to make sure that there is a trainer and training content approval process for conferences and training, that there's a system for venue booking, in-person trainings, conferences, and career fairs, that there is a streamlined registration process for all in-person training, conferences, and career fairs, and that also includes distance learning. There's a streamlined process for event facilitation of in-person training, conferences, and career fairs, and that distance learning formats have a really streamlined process for training and conferences, and a really streamlined process for all of the registration components as well. The awardee will also need to ensure that they support coordination of professional development to the CPPC. That way, we're reducing barriers for them to engage in family engagement services that lead to school readiness and success of early learners. There will also be some additional consulting projects as directed by CSD. So those will be conversations. That's something that we want to make sure that we put in there. That way, if there are additional projects that come up during the year that are aligned in the PD support service provider scope of service, that we have room to go ahead and do that, again, with the direction and discretion of the Children's Services Division. So again, these are the major categories that all of our required activities will sit inside of. So again, make sure that you go through those required activities. They are extensive, and it is very important that you understand what we're asking for before you apply. Now we're going to move on to our performance measures. So to track the progress towards achieving all of our outcome goals and to assess success, we will be monitoring a set of performance indicators internally that may include, but are not limited to, what's on your slide. So we will be monitoring and making sure that anybody participating in professional development opportunities has enhanced their skills or performance and knowledge, and that will be demonstrated through evaluations, monitoring of CSD, and child and family outcome reports. It will also be monitored through the CEL quarterly PD calendar. We will make sure that that is established and maintained for each program quarter. We will also be sure to monitor that PD opportunities are posted, tracked, reconciled, and reported on appropriately according to the Gateway's authorized entity expectations, and that successful enrollment and attendance of events meeting minimum participant capacity standards, we want to make sure that those are met and that collaboration with appropriate partners happens, and that, again, we're meeting all of our Gateway's authorized entity expectations. Continuing on with our performance measures, we will also be monitoring and recognizing intermediate progress of the performance indicators by tracking some things. We'll be tracking the number of training, conferences, and career fairs per annuum, also per quarter. We will also be tracking the number of CEL professionals who meet their annual required training hours in the areas that are relevant to their specified position responsibilities. We will be tracking the percentage of trainers and participants that express satisfaction with each opportunity through evaluation. And we will be tracking the number of CPPC members engaged in opportunities as demonstrated through registration. In addition to the performance standards and output metrics that I've listed, DFSS also encourages applicants to propose additional indicators and metrics, including those that demonstrate early success and are indicative of participants' progress. We will also have internal staff from CFD monitoring some of the trainers and popping in to just really evaluate the trainers and see how they're doing over the course of the program year. So thinking about the award, there is a selection process. There are 4 parts of the selection criteria, and the first part is the strength of the proposed program. And so listed here is what we'll be looking for. We'll be looking that the respondent or the applicant, we interchange those 2 words. So I just wanted to make that clear. We oftentimes will call you all either respondents or applicants, meaning the same one and the same thing. So we want to make sure that the applicant demonstrates an understanding of the annual training requirements for CEL professionals. And again, keeping in mind, we have multiple funding sources, which means we have multiple sets of requirements. So it's important that this support service provider understand those intricately. We want to make sure that the applicant understands the adult learning theory principles and explains their agency's approach in using the adult learning principles to review training content for approval of high quality PD opportunities. We'll also be looking to see if the applicant can illustrate the agency's approach in facilitating in-person trainings and moderating distance learning formats. We'll also be looking to see that the applicant can effectively describe their agency's approach for creating, maintaining, and disseminating the CEL quarterly professional development calendar. And we'll also be making sure that the applicant provides their agency's approach to adequately support the access of materials and services that support the professional development of the CPPC. So that's what's in the strength of proposed program section. And again, there are 3 more that we will go through. All right, so the next one is our program performance outcomes and quality measures. We want to make sure that the applicant demonstrates the understanding and the use of data tracking systems, including the use of the DFSS DSD Gateways Authorized Entity Portal. This is extremely important for tracking all of our attendance and reconciling all of the participants. We want to make sure that the applicant is able to clearly articulate their approach to ensuring robust data analysis and evaluation of PD opportunity effectiveness. Again, we are very responsive to our field, so we want to make sure that data is being used to analyze what we're doing and what we could improve upon. We want to make sure that the applicant is also able to describe how they plan to ensure that CPPC is provided appropriate opportunities to attend conferences. And within the RFP, there are definitely specifications about the CPPC. So if that's something that's new to you, I definitely encourage you to make sure that you're looking at that. Next, we have our organizational capacity. We spend a lot of time, making sure that you're aware of what we're looking for here, because again, this is a very large scope of service. And we want to make sure that that whoever is awarded, again, has the capacity to actually get all of this work delivered effectively. So we'll be looking to see that the applicant can provide evidence that supports their agency's capacity to ensure citywide professional development is planned, coordinated, delivered, and executed. We'll be looking to see that the applicant can accurately describe the roles or staff positions that will be used or activated to support the volume and complexity of this work. We'll be looking to see that the applicant clearly expresses a plan and has the available designated space to ensure in-person trainings are transitioned to virtual platforms or distance learning as needed. We'll also be making sure that the applicant demonstrates an approach for leveraging subject matter experts, or SMEs as we call them, to develop content, secure, store, and supply materials, marketing events, and the use of venues. We'll also be making sure that the applicant walks through their agency's ability to ensure validity and timeframe expectations of data entry through the Gateways Authorized Entity Portal. And we'll be making sure that the applicant articulates their agency's process to ensure the appropriate selection of services and how services will be paid for by the agency. This is a reimbursable contract, meaning that the support service provider will be expected to pay for services upfront and reimburse on the back end by DFSS DSD. So our next section is talking more about our reasonable costs, budget justification, and leverage of funds. So we'll be looking to make sure that the applicant has the fiscal capacity to implement the proposed program. We'll be looking to make sure that the applicant leverages other funds and in-kind contributions to support total program and administrative costs, meaning the state, federal, foundation, corporate, and individual donations. And we'll be making sure that the applicant demonstrates reasonable implementation costs and funding requests relative to its financial and human resources. The proposed budget will make sure supports the proposed scope of work that is planned for. So that is all of the categories of the selection criteria. And now we'll talk about the deadline. So the deadline for this applicant, for these applications is August 20th, 2020 at 12 noon. So the system, it's important to know, and I'm sure Julia will go over this again, but the system will shut down at this exact minute at noon. You will be kicked out. So please make sure that you submit prior to the time within the deadline so that your application can be considered. If you are kicked out, your application will not be considered. So that is very important to understand.
Great. So, Katie, this is the point where we transition from the content portion of the RFP, the RFP webinar, to the portion where we discuss how to actually the logistics behind going into the webinar or into the e-procurement environment. But we wanted to pause and maybe look at a couple of the questions that we have here. So I was just going to read these out loud, and maybe you and I can answer them, Katie.
Sure, that sounds great.
So it would be, it would be very helpful to have an overview of all the RFPs that are planned for support services, CSC support services. We want to be sure we are applying to those opportunities where we can be most effective for supporting your programs. That is something, we've already released, I think we're on our 7th or 8th RFP for support services, but we can definitely check and see about releasing, what we're going to do next. I think there's about, 4 or 5 still in the hopper.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't have any concrete release dates on those, but I can see if we can maybe post the list of what's left.
Sure.
Here's one. Do you envision the selected provider doing PD and specific service topic?
Sorry, Julia, before you go into the next question, I just wanted to hop in here and say, if we're able to get you all a list, all it will have is the name of the RFPs. So what I will suggest to all of you is to make sure that, I can't tell you which ones to apply for. You will have to, use your professional discretion to figure out what, what you feel is most appropriate for you to apply to. That is whether you are a current contractor of ours or a brand new applicant that hasn't contracted with us before. I cannot tell you which RFPs to apply for. So, it's really, your responsibility to do your due diligence and make sure that you are reviewing and making sure that you are, checking our website to see when these RFPs are released. But that is really the best advice that I have for you, is to make sure that you are just making sure that you're aware of all of the opportunities so that you can look through the RFPs yourself and determine which ones you should apply to. Because again, I cannot guide you in any way, shape, or form.
That you bring up a really good point, Katie, in that we can I can tell you what's planned. I can tell you maybe the names of the RFPs, but I'm not going to be able to share the content with you. Like I can say, oh, we're planning on, strategic communications or nutrition, but beyond that, we're not really going to be able to say to the the ins and the outs specifically what we're going to be RFPing for. That's the job of the RFP, is to tell you that. So we can kind of give you a heads up on yeah, we're going to do dental, or yeah, we're going to do nutrition, but we're not going to be able to tell you anything more than that, like the title. And also, as Katie pointed out, it really is up to your professional discretion and assessment of your own business and what you're interested in to make a decision about whether or not you're going to apply, whether or not it's an appropriate application for you guys to make. So anyway, the next question is, do you envision the selected provider doing PD and specific service topics, or organizing/coordinating with other CEL support providers? Is this more coordination or direct training design/delivery?
That's a great question. This is much more coordination. So we're not necessarily looking for trainers to be part of this support service provider. We're looking for people to organize and coordinate trainers. So the reason for that is you're going to be, whoever's awarded is going to be over all of our professional development content. And so, we have many different content areas. Some of them, education, disabilities and diverse learners, family community engagement, data management, enrollment, recruitment, eligibility, selection, and attendance, or SIA, human resources, program governance. So we don't expect this support service provider to be the guru of all of those contents. We expect this support service provider to leverage those subject matter experts either out of our current, at the time in December, what will be our current support service provider contracts. So You know, Julia had mentioned nutrition. So this support service provider will know I need to plan some nutrition trainings. I'm going to go coordinate with the support service provider who provides nutrition, because within that support service provider, I will find subject matter experts who can deliver or already have developed trainings that can then deliver them with some ease. Or the support service provider can say, I know of a great professional who could give us a fantastic training on this specific nutrition topic. So this support service provider would procure that person. Again, that would be when the support service provider over PD would have to pay for that professional. If the support service provider for PD collaborates with a different support service provider within CSD, then their payment would be coming out of their contract rather than the PD contract. So I hope that gives a little bit more insight. It is the responsibility of this support service provider to coordinate these services and organize them rather than to be the expert in delivering them. However, the awardee will be approving the training content. So that means that the awardee will have to understand the adult learning theory principles to make sure that whatever trainings are, being reviewed actually meet those so that they can be approved. So this support service provider will also approve training content. So it is helpful to have some content knowledge, but you don't need to have the knowledge that would be as versed as a trainer would be. So I hope that helps.
Okay. So then here we go. It would be helpful if we could see all the questions that are being posted here. I don't know if we're able to share the questions with you in real time, but all of these questions and the answers are what basically roll up to be the amendment to the RFP, which will be posted within 7 to 10 days of this webinar. So I'm not sure, I don't know, Tom, if it's possible to show these questions, but we can definitely, these questions definitely are very much shareable and shared in the amendment.
Yeah, we can't share the questions live with everybody, but like some other forms of technology platforms have the capability in their chat, but there will be a recording of the webinar, and that will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel that will have answers to these. And
that link is posted on our DFSS website too. So the link to the YouTube channel, you can either go directly to YouTube and look for the DFSS website. The link is posted there, and then we also post the link from the YouTube link on the DFSS website on the City of Chicago website. So, with the exception of the data specialist, can a person hold more than one role in the PD team?
I think that's another, I really like that question because it helps us get a better understanding. So again, you have flexibility to design the team as you see fit. What I will say is those 4 that we listed out, the project manager, the facilitation coordinator, the event coordinator, and the data specialist, if you have a minimum of 4, I think that you can possibly get this work done. I mean, I think 4 would be adequate. I think if you end up trying to double up, you could run into, our PD season is nonstop. So like a lot of what's out there is PD is very heavy and intensive just before school. And then again, in the winter, we don't stop. We run full year. So we need full-time people to be able to get this out. And keep in mind, this is citywide. This is on a very expansive level. And so if you have less than 4 people, I'm going to be concerned that you do not have the organizational capacity to meet what we're looking for. But again, you have flexibility in how you're going to design it. So that's the best answer I can give. And again, just being really transparent that 4 to me is a minimum.
Great. So here is a question. How do you get the complete RFP? Well, to get the complete RFP, you go into e-procurement and you can download it from there. I think actually if you just go to the e-procurement website at the City of Chicago, and we're going to cover kind of some of that coming up in the next portion of the webinar, you can click on the little eyeglass logo and you can download the RFP from there as well. So here can you return to the budget justification page for a moment? I wanted to do a quick screen grab.
And again, you're going to be emailed these, so we don't really need to do that right now in the interest of time. You will get this. This is being recorded. You can see this again. And again, all of this information is really taken straight out of the RFP. So there's nothing additional here. This is what is in the RFP.
Yeah. So here we are. Will the names of the remaining 4 to 5 RFPs be released in a time frame that will provide enough time prior to the due date of this PD RFP to make an informed decision about which RFPs to pursue? I would say no. Mm-hmm. I would, I can't really, I am not in charge of releasing this information, and neither is Katie. I am not willing to commit to saying that we will release the names in the time frame that will provide enough time. There will be an answer to this question in the amendment. Now, the FAQ, the amendment to this RFP, which is basically the FAQs. But again, I'm not convinced. I mean, maybe if you're super familiar with Head Start programming and the ins and outs, just knowing the name of the RFP might not be enough for you to make a fully informed decision about this. I think that my advice would be, look at this RFP. If it is something that you are interested in and capable of doing, I would apply for it. And I wouldn't assume that there is something that's going to be better. Or, and if there is, apply for that.
Yeah, Julia, I would totally agree with you on that. I think that, again, just back to what I was saying earlier, really review these RFPs. You should, again, releasing the names isn't going to necessarily help you because we can't give you anything but the names. We can't go over the content with you. So if you're seeing that, some of this work is relevant to you, but it's not completely all relevant to you, I would, again, use your professional discretion. Does that mean that you go for it, or does that mean that you not? And I would make decisions based on each RFP rather than the collective.
Right. Yeah, you yeah, I totally concur. Okay, here's the last question that we have for now. For this application, to put a budget together and estimate what PD will come from the other support service vendor budgets versus what this applicant would have to include in their budget, it seems important to know what the other PD service provider scopes will entail. Could this information be shared for budget purposes?
So in the, we are asking that everybody submit a cost proposal. And in there, you, again, reading through the RFP, it is very clear what you will need. What you will need to provide a budget around. Excuse me again. So you will need to read the RFP itself. You will need to make sure that you're reading the budget application questions, because in the budget application questions, that also gives you very specific and a very specific understanding of what you will have to pay for. It's all outlined in there. So there really is, again, the biggest takeaway here is to understand that you don't have to pay for trainers. You don't have to go out procuring professional trainers. You can do it all using our CEL service providers because we have content expertise within not only our service providers, but also within our division as well. So there is, other than, I would say, conferences, that might be a little different. You might be looking for a specific keynote speaker that is, maybe more from a state level or a national level, but in general, you will be really accessing, typically, if that's your choice, you'll be leveraging, all of your PD development experts within our support service contractors. It's really important that you familiarize yourself with the cells and with the Head Start program performance standards. Once you've done that, you will understand what content areas we have. And it's going to be essential that you understand that as you apply. So, you can look over the Head Start program performance standards. You can look through even just the sections within the cells will give you some answers to this question.
Okay. And here we have one more question. We are currently a PD vendor for DFSS. Can you be an awardee of this contract as well as a provider of services? If you're currently if you currently do this work for us, we of course encourage you to reapply or consider reapplying if the scope is something that is still interesting for you.
Yes, keeping in mind that we are doing RFPs, meaning that we are re-awarding our contracts.
Yeah. For the performance measures, does DFSS have a way they want this future vendor to measure skill, performance, and knowledge of participants via evaluations?
So yes, we have an evaluation form that we will be using, again, that is aligned to the Gateway's authorized entity guidelines. So again, if you're not familiar with those, you should become familiar with those, become familiar with what the Gateway's authorized entity requires of evaluations. And again, in the RFP, it will have more specifics about what we will use to track performance measures as well.
Great. So we currently don't have any more questions. I think I'm going to start with the part where I talk about e-procurement and how to actually make an application, and then we can take more questions after I go through that portion of the presentation for today. So Tom, can you maybe move us to the next slide? Oh, there we go, questions. And so to make an application for this RFP, what everybody needs to do is first access the iSupplier or e-procurement account. If you don't have access to this account, please do it now. Quickly and promptly. It takes anywhere from 24 hours to 7 business days to actually get into the, to get set up in iSupplier. You have to fill out a form, and then the Department of Procurement Services sends you back an email that allows you to register into the account. So I say, start early with that if you're new to our system. Several slides down, there's going to be a link to that. The other thing I would have to say is that this is procurement system. It's built on an Oracle platform. I don't find it to be particularly intuitive, but it really, in the 3 years that I've been working with it, it really doesn't have many bugs or glitches. If you're experiencing a lot of problems with the e-procurement system, it most likely has to do with your computer not being able to deal with it, as opposed to there's something inherently wrong with the e-procurement system itself. In 3 years, it's never crashed. It will kick you. It does time out after about 10 minutes, sometimes longer, but mostly about 10 minutes. If you haven't, so if you leave the screen up, it will time out on you, and you'll have to re-log in. So to that being said, I say, start early. I always say start early because, hey, that's what I say, and I believe in starting early. It gives you time to think through, to really do your best work and prevent, your best job on something. And I also say save often, because a lot of times, especially with so many people working from home, internet connections drop, and so you just want to make sure that your work is saved. Just as an overview, I'd like to I like to remind people that read the RFP document itself, the scope, the selection and evaluation criteria. Those things are developed for your reading pleasure. We know that they're dense documents. They're sometimes confusing, or they're just, they're not, it's not like, reading a mystery. or maybe it is like reading a mystery, but it's not maybe as much fun as reading a mystery, but they are very informative, and everything in the RFP scope falls into the evaluation criteria, and everything in the evaluation criteria falls into the application questions. So it's all connected, and everything in the application questions goes back to that evaluation criteria and is part of our evaluation tools. So if you're looking for direction on how to answer a specific question, my advice is always go back to this RFP document and really read the scope, read the program description, read the requirements, read what our expectations are, because that's where we really outline what we are looking for in an applicant. And of course, everybody does things differently, and we're looking for that kind of like ingenuity and innovation, thoughtfulness and creativity. But if you're just stumped about like, well, what do they mean and what do they want, go to the RFP document and look through that, and look through that evaluation criteria, because it shows you what the priority is going to be. In terms of physically just operating, uploading, writing your RFP answers to your questions, there's a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces for each sort of text box question. Questions are referred to in the e-procurement environment as requirements, and your answers are very glamorously described as quote values. So in that quote value box that you would be writing your answer is a 4,000 character limit. The system will not tell you when you've run out of those 4,000 characters, so we highly, highly, highly recommend that you do your application answers in a word processing document that allows you to count the characters and then do a cut and paste. I also recommend that you do that because there's a place, and we'll see when you go to submit, there's a place where you can get a printable view of everything you've uploaded and submitted, but there is no place, after you hit submit, there's actually no place where you'll be able to access what you've written in your application. It's one of those things, like you send us the application, it's sucked away and we get it, but you can't see it anymore, even if you're awarded a contract. So if you want a record of your work, if nothing else, then to build some stock language for other for other applications you might be doing, I very much recommend that you do, you set up a version in a word processing document that allows you to manage the character limitations, but also allows you to keep a record of what you've written. E-procurement was developed on Internet Explorer, and it works best on that. If you're having a lot of problems with the system, I would run it on Internet Explorer. I have successfully run it on Firefox, Chrome. Those are the two that I've used it on with no real problem. Don't use your back button on the browser. Try to, everything in e-procurement takes you to somewhere else is highlighted in blue. I would use those. The minute you use your back browser, it will stop saving your work, and when you go to save, it will kick you out of the system. So don't do that. Don't use the back browser. I forget and do it all the time, but it will, what happens is it stops saving your work, and when you go to save it, it will just be like error and throw you out, and then when you go back in, nothing has been saved. So let's go to the second slide on this. So working in e-procurement, this is so this is a correction I'm going to make. The due date is August 20th, not May 5th. To submit multiple applications for the RFP, I don't think that's going to happen here, but if you were going to do that, you have to use a separate email address for each submittal. And then I would say avoid the rush. Plan on submissions taking 30 to 60 minutes, and I'm going to walk you through the submission process. As Katie indicated, late applications will not be accepted. In fact, if you can't, they're not accepted. You can do your applications, you can save your work and submit it, and then pull it back from that submission state up until the due date. And that's one way that you would have almost like a placeholder, even if it's not finished, but we cannot accept a late application. If you're working in e-procurement and you're up against that deadline and you don't make it, what will happen is that the system grabs your application and literally like sucks it away. So you'll be working and all of a sudden it's like the system just shut down. That was the application closing, and then you're like almost ready to submit, but you haven't quite, and then the application literally sucked away from you, from us, you know, like it's irretrievable. The only way we can accept applications would be at that point, like would be to re-release the entire RFP, make everybody who got their stuff in on time reapply, and that really doesn't happen. In terms of support, you can call me or email me. I try to respond to anybody within 24 hours. I generally don't check my email on weekends, but if you call, I might get the phone call. You can also go to the e-procurement hotline, which is 312-744-HELP, which I think is like, or you can email them at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. Both of these phone numbers are all over the web. They're all over the RFP document itself. And just note that the hotline operates during business hours only from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and that they only, and that they will take, you know, I try to respond within 24 hours. They try to respond within 24 to 48 hours. Let's go to the next slide. So here we are for technical assistance. If you have questions on registration, go to eprocurementsupport@cityofchicago.org. Anything else, go to customersupport@cityofchicago.org or call the helpline. If you are a person that really learns best through kind of webinars, PowerPoints, that kind of stuff, there's a lot of training materials on how to do stuff in e-procurement. If you have a specific question, I have a lot of sort of step-by-step screenshotty kinds of stuff, like 2 of which we'll go through next, that I can send to you. It's not a problem. We want you to be able to really focus on writing a good application for us and hopefully make this stuff as less, you know, intrusive as possible. So I think now we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about 2 things to do. One is how to accept an amendment, and then the next set of slides I'll show you is how to do the submission process. As indicated, we do the webinars. From the webinar questions, we develop sort of frequently asked question and answers, and we do any corrections that need to be in the RFP. There aren't really any errors, but I did put the wrong date on the webinar for the due date, so there will be a correction for that. So for that, when you have started an amendment, or when we do an amendment, if you've already started doing your application, you'll be asked to accept the amendment. As part of the process of doing that, it will suck what you've worked on into the new amended RFP. If you don't accept the amendment, I don't think you actually can even work on it. If you haven't started the application yet, you're going to go to this screen. You're going to create quote, which is how you start an RFP or start an application with us, and then you hit go. And you have this thing that will say, yeah, you have to accept the amendment. And so then it's going to throw you through a certain number of screens where you sort of acknowledge and accept the amendment. As you can see, the City of Chicago is very interested in making you well aware of the fact that we really expect you to read and be responsible for the information in the amendment. If you had a technical point with us, well, you didn't say X, Y, or Z, and so that's why I my application wasn't accepted or acceptable. Generally speaking, if it was in the amendment, you just signed, you waded through 4 screens saying that you acknowledged it, you accept it, you're responsible for it, you've read it. So, just read it. I mean, it might be interesting or educational, or at least affirming. Since you've been to the webinar, you've heard everything. What we say here is basically we're going to write it down and we'll put it up as a question, and then we'll post it as an amendment, and now we all know it. It's public record. So if the RFP, so if you're going to start this quote, it will say, oh, you have to do the amendment. You're going to hit create quote. You're going to hit go. It will take you to this next slide, where you have a lot, which begins the acceptance and acknowledgement process. So if you wanted to open the RFP document itself, or the page on any procurement that has the RFP document in it, you would hit this document number in blue. As I said, everything in blue goes to something else in e-procurement. If you wanted to review the changes, you would hit the little eyeglass icon over here on the right-hand side. You'll see here that it's an amendment description. It says this amendment is to remind, it basically is like a little one-word synopsis of what it is. Like what I would say now is like, this amendment contains the frequently asked questions from the webinar and other questions that we've received. And so you're going to review all of those changes, and then you're going to hit the Acknowledge Amendments section or button here on the lower right-hand side, and that will take you to the following screen. So here you're going to accept that you acknowledged the terms and conditions. So you're going to check this tiny box saying, I accept the terms and conditions of the RFQ and also acknowledge the changes made to the RFQ document. The RFQ amendment document has the RFQ number. And then you're going to hit Acknowledge. And then you are going to click on Yes to indicate that you confirm your acknowledgement of the amendment. Because we are very thorough about making sure that you have read the amendment. And after you hit that yes, we'll see, you get to accept. So you're going to click this tiny box saying that you have read and accept the terms and conditions. The terms and conditions actually, in the case of our RFPs, don't ever change, except that you've read. So you accept the terms and conditions, you've accept and acknowledge, you acknowledge that you've accepted the amendment, and that there you go. So then you're going to click on the accept button, which here is either on the top or bottom of the right-hand side. And by accepting your amendment, this final step, you have become completely responsible for the contents of the amendment. So now we're going to go to the next thing, which is how do you submit an application? When I say 30 to 60 minutes, give yourself 30 to 60 minutes. It isn't one of those like lovely kind of movie submission things where you just press like a little button and it clicks and whoosh, it's all gone. No, this system wants to check your work and then tell you, if it sees stuff missing. And again, you have to really kind of make sure that you're really, really prepared. What sometimes eats some people's time up is they have these errors, and that the error messages are a little difficult to decipher. I'm going to walk you through 2 common error messages just so you know. Let's look here on the next slide. So you're ready to submit. So you're going to save your draft one more time, and then you're going to click Continue. When you click Continue, the system goes through your entire application and then checks for stuff that might be missing or that it thinks of as an error. So let's click Continue and go to the next slide. So it's going to check everything. If there is any missing information, it's going to give you an error message on the top of the left-hand side here. This example just has one error message. I've done in the testing environment when I've been playing with this, you can get, you can get as many as you need. You can get, if you don't fill out a lot of the quote value boxes, you'll get an error message for every single quote value that you didn't write in. In this particular instance, we talk about the error message reads, you must quote on at least one line of the RFQ. This is for contracts, for contracting, which happens later. We actually don't use the lines to, we don't use the lines in our evaluation or review of your application. We're going to look at the cost proposal and your application questions, but we do want you to quote on at least one line, preferably just put ones in all of the lines, and that means that the lines get carried over into the contract environment, makes it easier for us to do a budget when you're up to contracting, but just at least do one line. And so let's go to the next screen where I have a little bit of it blown up. You can see here, you must quote on at least one line of the RFQ. In this, there's the lines tab. Usually there's sort of like a keyword in each of these errors that gives you some hint as to what the problem is. So we talked about the lines. Let's go to the next screen. I have another one here. In this example, the error is about an unanswered question, which is a quote value is required for the requirement first name. In this case, the quote value, as we discussed before, is that text box. The requirement is the actual question itself, and first name is the name of the question. In this case, it's relatively obvious. Generally speaking, the questions are named, you know, like even for the longer narrative questions, if it's about staffing, the question will be named staffing, so you have some idea of where to go looking. So after you have gotten rid of all your errors, let's go to the next slide. Once your application is free from errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. So at this point, if you click on continue, and just like you did in the beginning, you'll click continue. The eProcurement will do a scan. It will find no errors, and it will put you into this review and submit phase. And in the review and submit phase, you can see basically your entire the entire application that you're making. This is a place where it has a printable view where it will pull the application and print it off for you. It won't really be a file, I don't think, or if it is, it's a PDF file. But you can get that printable view if you want a hard copy of what you're submitting. But as we talked about before, it's really in your best interest to just sort of do this application in WordPerfect and cut and paste in there. And let's go to the next slide. So this is, here you are, here's your review and submit. You're going to be able to, I just wanted to give you a screenshot of what it looks like. You're going to check your attachments up here. You can scroll, it will be like one big page. So you scroll all the way down. You can see all your responses. And so let's go to the next slide, which shows you the bottom of the page, because at the bottom of the page, you can provide your signature, and that's really sort of the end of the submission process. Really what eats up people's time is the errors. So at this point, if you got into this screen, you're almost home. What you're going to do is you're going to put in your name and your title, and then you're going to check the box. You don't check the box, even though like in my head, the logic is check the box because it comes first and then do this other stuff. Putting your name and your title and then check the box because that's because it will give you an error message if you do it the other way. And then after that, let's go to the next slide. You will be able to submit. And so you'll click submit, and then you will have submitted. So when you click submit, make sure that you see the submittal confirmation screen, which looks like this. It says confirmation. The eProcurement is going to send you a confirmation email within 24 hours of your submission. If you're a person that's feeling a little anxious or just really wants to know quicker than that, drop me a line, email me, or call me. The minute you hit submit, it shows up on I can go in and see if you've submitted. And if you want more immediate verification, I am more than happy to provide that to you. These applications are long and somewhat daunting. And if you want like the immediate confirmation, I'm more than happy to look it up and send you an email saying like, yes, I see your application, if that's what you need, or you get the confirmation screen and you get the email 24 hours later, and that is, that works for you. Whatever works. There are many things I can't change about eProcurement, but I can give you an immediate confirmation. So let's go. I think that, that really has the end of what I have to say about eProcurement. We have time for more questions. And I see here, I cannot find the RFP on the eProcurement bid opportunities website. Sometimes it gets hidden. Let me see if I can pull up the name.
Julia, she said, Julia, if you don't mind the system, she did find it after she said that.
Okay, great. I'm glad that you found it. So, all right, here's another question. To clarify, the awardee is mainly coordination and planning, as opposed to a vendor to select, develop, and actually deliver the actual professional development.
That's correct. There might be times where if you have subject matter expertise on your team, and they want to train, you know, that's something that you can definitely choose to do. But the main objective here is that the awardee is coordinating all of the PD services citywide.
Okay. Here's another question. Because the awardee will create and maintain the CEL quarterly PD calendar, does the awardee decide what PD is delivered and by what vendors or SMEs? Or does DFSS decide the training topics and vendors?
It is a collaborative effort, but predominantly the awardee will be the one that is selecting the SMEs.
Okay. Shelley Maxwell, I will contact you via email or call you after this webinar, and I'm happy to walk you through as to how to get to the full application. So this kind of concludes the webinar. If you have programmatic questions about this RFP, here's Katie's email and phone number. If you have questions about e-procurement, you can call me or email me. My phone number, this is my work phone. It directly goes to my cell phone, so you can really call me anytime.
And I would say for me, please email me. That's the best way to get a hold of me, especially during COVID-19. Yeah,
I will say, like, just because you can call me, like, leave a message, and I will call you back. I often don't hear my cell phone for any phone calls for whatever reason. Well, half the time I turn the ringer off because it's distracting. But anyway, yeah. So just, you know, email, phone call. If there are no other questions, do we want to leave it up for another minute or two, Tom? How do you?
Let's see. Let me look through. I believe all the questions were asked. I'll leave your contact information on the screen because the next screen just says thank you. And maybe we'll give it like another 20 seconds to see if anyone has any more questions. And then we can end the webinar.
Sure.
I see some people are leaving. You know, again, just want to thank you all so much for being part of this webinar today. We will, you know, make these amendments that are in response to your questions. We greatly appreciate you being here. We very much look forward to awarding this contract and getting this work started.
Yeah. And Shelley, since I can't see your contact information, if you would please drop me an email or call, I would be happy to walk you through on how to get to the application.
Let's see if there's another question or it's just a comment.
Oh, thank you.
Came in. Oh, yep, the person just said thank you to Julia. So I think this concludes the end of the webinar.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Julia.